What happened when family wounds spilled out in front of the whole world? The story of Kirk Franklin and his son Carrion shocked everyone because it was not just about music, it was about pain, betrayal, and secrets that refused to stay hidden. Kirk Franklin, the gospel legend loved by millions, had always been seen as a man who broke barriers, a man who gave gospel music a new life, and a man who showed faith could be powerful even in the mainstream world. But behind the smiling photos, the awards, and the polished image of a family man, there was a side that no one expected to see. You won't believe how quickly the picture-perfect image started to break apart, let me tell you. This is how everything began to change. Back in March 2021, Carrion Franklin, Kirk's estranged son, came forward with something that shook the gospel world to its core. He released an audio clip on social media, and the voice that millions had known for singing about love, forgiveness, and God's grace was suddenly heard shouting curse words at his own son. The words were harsh, full of anger, and carried a force that no one had ever imagined from a man like Kirk Franklin. That recording spread across Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram within hours, and people could not believe what they were hearing. For so many fans, Kirk had been the example of a gospel man who never failed. But here was proof that even legends could lose control in ways that left scars. But here is the shocking part. Kirk did not deny it. He admitted the voice was his. When Kirk gave his statement, he explained that the clip was real, but he also said it was cut and taken out of context. According to him, his relationship with Carrion had been toxic for years, and that the recording was just one side of a painful father-son battle. The apology he gave was not to his son, but to the fans who had been hurt and confused by what they heard. This is where it gets interesting, because the apology did not settle the matter at all. Instead, it drew a line between two groups: those who defended Kirk, saying every parent loses patience sometimes, and those who stood with Carrion, saying the leak was only a small piece of a much bigger story of abuse and neglect. Very quickly, the entire entertainment and church community was talking about it. Some famous pastors and artists defended Kirk as a man under pressure, reminding the world that no one was perfect, not even gospel icons. But others pointed to the fact that Carrion had been estranged for years and still felt the need to expose his father, which meant something deeper was going on. What made the story different was not just that a celebrity had a family fight, but that the fight was being played out in public and the world was picking sides. Carrion presented himself as a victim who had been silenced for too long, while Kirk tried to show himself as a father who had made mistakes but was still trying to hold on to his image. The craziest part was that the leak was not the end of it. Instead, it was the beginning of a much larger storm. Carrion made it clear in interviews and posts that there was more truth to come, and he was not finished. Destiny took an unexpected turn when fans realized this was not a one-time drama, but a battle that could last for years. That one audio clip was like a spark that set fire to a story no one could put out. And as the world kept watching, the family's wounds grew more visible, more raw, and more dangerous than ever before. When people thought the storm would settle after the 2021 audio leak, they were wrong. Years passed, but the bitterness between Kirk Franklin and his son never went away. Then, in 2025, Carrion returned with something even darker, something that would shake not only the Franklin family, but the entire gospel industry. This time, it wasn't just words, it was pictures, graphic photos that Carrion claimed showed the physical abuse he had suffered at the hands of his father. You won't believe the reaction when those images hit the internet. They spread faster than wildfire, with fans, bloggers, and even major media outlets pushing them everywhere. Let me tell you, this is how one family's private war became a worldwide conversation. The photos showed bruises, cuts, and marks on Carrion's body. He said these were not random injuries, not accidents, but the result of years of violence inside his own family. What made this story different was the way Carrion described the pain. He said the public only knew Kirk as the man who preached forgiveness, love, and faith through his songs, but at home, it was a different story. He painted his father as a man who cared more about protecting his image than repairing his broken relationship with his son. But here is the shocking part. Carrion suggested that the photos were only the beginning, that he had more evidence waiting to be revealed if he needed to. This hint alone left fans anxious, wondering just how deep the scars of this family war really went. The internet reacted in the only way it knew how, by taking sides. Some believed every word Carrion said, claiming the photos finally proved that his pain had always been real. They argued that no son would go this far unless the abuse was true. On the other hand, many fans of Kirk refused to believe it. They said the timing was suspicious because Kirk had been celebrating career milestones, releasing new music, touring, and receiving tributes. To them, the craziest part was that Carrion always seemed to resurface when his father was at the height of success. This made people question whether the photos were truly proof of abuse or a tool for revenge. And this is where it gets interesting. Kirk himself stayed silent at first. He didn't rush to post statements. He didn't attack his son online, and he didn't hold press conferences. That silence spoke louder than words. Some people said it was guilt, that he had no defense against his son's evidence. Others said it was wisdom, that fighting his son in public would only make things worse. Destiny took an unexpected turn here because instead of ending the story, Kirk's silence made it grow even bigger. The less he spoke, the more people speculated, and the louder Carrion's voice became. As weeks passed, Carrion doubled down. He appeared on podcasts, went live on social media, and repeated his claims again and again. He spoke not only about his own suffering, but also about the bigger issue of power and control inside religious households. He said his story was an example of what happened when leaders cared more about money, ministry, and public reputation than about healing their own families. Suddenly, this wasn't just a father and son problem anymore. It became a symbol, a warning, and a debate about faith, hypocrisy, and the truth hiding behind closed doors. When those graphic photos flooded social media, the reaction was explosive. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok lit up with debates, theories, and hashtags that kept the story alive day and night. This wasn't just gossip anymore, it turned into a cultural storm. Some users stood firmly with Carrion, demanding accountability and justice, saying his bravery gave a voice to countless children of powerful parents who had been silenced. Others defended Kirk, insisting that the photos were fake, exaggerated, or even staged. Let me tell you, this is how the internet turned a private family battle into a public trial where every single person felt they had a right to judge. But here is the shocking part. The gospel community's silence made things worse. Kirk Franklin was not just any artist, he was the face of gospel for decades. He had won Grammys, sold millions of albums, and stood side by side with some of the biggest names in both gospel and mainstream music. His songs had been played in churches, weddings, and even funerals. So when allegations this serious surfaced, people expected big voices in the church to take a stand. Instead, many leaders chose to stay quiet or give very soft statements about forgiveness and not rushing to judgment. That silence was deafening, and it made the public wonder if the industry was protecting one of its biggest stars instead of searching for truth. This is where it gets interesting. A few bold preachers and younger gospel voices began speaking up, questioning whether the industry had a habit of protecting its own, even when the truth was ugly. They argued that fame, money, and influence often allowed leaders to escape accountability. Meanwhile, fans who had spent years loving Kirk's music were suddenly torn. Could the man who gave them songs like Imagine Me and Stomp really be guilty of the kind of abuse his son described? For many, it felt like a betrayal, as if the man they trusted with their faith through music had been living a double life all along. The craziest part was that the story didn't stay inside the church walls. Secular podcasts, talk shows, and YouTube commentators picked it up, turning the scandal into mainstream news. They dissected the photos, replayed the 2021 audio leak, and pointed out how celebrity families often hid dysfunction behind success and money. Even legal experts stepped into the conversation, suggesting that if Carrion chose to take his claims further, those photos could possibly be used as evidence in court. Suddenly, Kirk Franklin wasn't just facing public judgment. He was facing questions about his career, his reputation, and even his future in gospel music. Destiny took an unexpected turn again when mental health professionals weighed in. They explained how years of toxic relationships between parents and children could leave scars that lasted a lifetime, scars that were emotional as much as they were physical. They said both Kirk and Carrion seemed trapped in a cycle of pain that neither one knew how to break. But instead of sympathy calming the story, the public only wanted more answers. Week after week, as Kirk stayed mostly silent, Carrion became louder, insisting that the world still didn't know the full story, and that hint of more secrets waiting to come out kept everyone on edge. As the scandal grew larger, it was no longer just about a father and a son. It was about the credibility of an entire industry built on faith. Kirk Franklin had been more than a musician. He was a cultural figure, a man who reshaped gospel by blending it with hip-hop and R&B, making it cool and accessible to younger generations. For more than 3 decades, his songs had given people hope, strength, and comfort. But here is the shocking part. Now those same people were questioning whether the man behind the music had been hiding a darker truth all along. Fans who once saw Kirk as an ambassador of faith were suddenly torn between loyalty to his legacy and the disturbing claims of his son. What made this story different was the way it reached into churches, homes, and even boardrooms. Event organizers wondered if inviting Kirk would bring backlash. Radio stations debated whether to keep his music in rotation. Sponsors and industry leaders feared that being linked to him could damage their own reputations. Behind the scenes, whispers filled the gospel world. Was this the beginning of a fall for the man they once called untouchable? At the same time, Carrion continued to fuel the fire, presenting himself as more than just a hurt son. He said his story was proof of a larger problem: powerful religious leaders hiding behind pulpits while their families suffered in silence. This is where it gets interesting, because Carrion's claims came at a time when churches across America were already under fire for scandals, cover-ups, and questions about hypocrisy. His words tapped directly into that moment, making his story not just personal, but symbolic. The craziest part was how divided the generations became. Younger audiences on social media leaned toward believing Carrion, pointing to the photos as undeniable proof. Older generations who had grown up with Kirk's music hesitated, saying nobody was perfect and asking for grace. That generational split showed how differently people process scandals in the digital age. Some demanded instant accountability, while others clung to forgiveness. Destiny took an unexpected turn when people began asking the hardest question of all. What did this mean for faith itself? If someone like Kirk Franklin could be accused of such darkness, how many others were hiding behind carefully built images? For some fans, it felt like betrayal, almost as if their faith in the message was shaken because of the messenger. For others, it was a reminder that even leaders were human, and the real danger was in putting anyone on a pedestal too high to fall. In the end, the story of Kirk and Carrion Franklin was no longer just about family wounds. It became a storm that questioned the integrity of a father, the pain of a son, and the future of gospel music itself. And as Carrion continued to hint that more secrets could still come out, the world waited, divided, and uncertain about what the next chapter of this painful public war would reveal.